Remember Trump's 60-day memo of understanding with Iran from June? It was basically a deal with Iran to try to reach an actual deal to the war. Well, that expired today, and Donald Trump has done nothing to help find an end to this war. Absolutely nothing. What he has done instead is lie, bluff, gaslight, threaten war crimes, and then fold over and over and over, showing that after nearly 6 months, he still has no strategy for how to win or even how to end his war of choice in Iran. And worse for him and every other Republican who's done nothing to stop this, voter fury is mounting with just 78 days until the midterm elections. The New York Times reports, quote, "The milestone nonetheless shows how Mr. Trump has struggled to achieve his war aims, like forcing Iran to curtail its nuclear ambitions, and how emboldened the Iranian government feels with the two countries at risk of further military conflict." This morning, Donald Trump posted, quote, "The number one goal is and always will be that Iran cannot have in any way, shape, or form a nuclear weapon." But Donald Trump is no closer to achieving that goal than he was 60 days ago. Here's what he said when asked about that today.
Are you any closer today to reaching a final deal to end Iran's nuclear program?
Well, they want to make a deal, but they're not going to make the kind of a deal that I feel is necessary. Look, we're in there for one reason. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. You understand that? Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and they won't have a nuclear weapon.
How many times have we heard Donald Trump say they want to make a deal? A lot. You know what? I've lost count, actually. And what is there to show for it? There is nothing. The New York Times reports there has been little indication that Iran and the United States have extensively discussed the Iranian nuclear program since the ceasefire in June, let alone formulated a deal that could satisfy both sides. The Iranian foreign minister said over the weekend that Iran had yet to decide whether to resume talks with the United States. But the 60-day timeline was no longer relevant, he added, given that the June agreement was essentially defunct. Donald Trump was also asked about the Strait of Hormuz today.
Last week you said that you would soon declare the Strait of Hormuz to be a territory of the United States. Could you elaborate?
Well, I just think it's a great idea. Yeah, I mean, we control it. We control it with the blockade. We have a blockade. We control it with the blockade. And I like the idea of declaring it a territory.
Okay. Well, as much as Donald Trump wants it to be true, the United States has never controlled the Strait of Hormuz during this war. Not today, not yesterday, not last week, not last month, and we won't tomorrow either. And the idea of making it a U.S. territory, folks, that's just ridiculous. Earlier today, the New York Times reported that with the deadline abandoned and both sides apparently unwilling to extend it, quote, "The war has transformed into a contest of willpower and economic endurance that has no end in sight. Those inside the White House are well aware that they will blow past Monday's deadline and that the conflict has largely morphed into one of economic warfare, according to two Americans familiar with the negotiations." So Donald Trump has, as he always does, returned to threatening more attacks against Iran, despite multiple reports of depleted missile stockpiles. Today, he told Fox, quote, "What we have used so far is peanuts." The president told Fox News Iran should raise the white flag of surrender. He went on to say, "I have no time schedule. I'm not in a hurry." Nearly 6 months of war. No strategy to end his war, let alone win it. And he's not in a hurry? Do you hear that, America? While you are all out there paying higher gas prices because of Donald Trump and his war, he's not in a hurry. And today he also told Fox, and please excuse my language, that he would, quote, "bomb the shit out of Oman if they hinder negotiations." Oman is an ally of this country. So the president of the United States is now threatening to bomb an American ally. He was asked about that earlier.
This morning you said you would bomb the S out of Oman if they got in the way of reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Would you say you're out of patience with Oman, a strategic
No, I don't think they behave very well, but we'd handle them very easily, just like we do others.
Just based on
And there's new reporting that Iran is preparing for a drawn-out war After the signing of that 60-day agreement in June, Iranian and Arab officials tell the Wall Street Journal that Iran's hardline leaders huddled in Tehran and came up with a different plan. In their view, the pact was likely just an attempt by the U.S. and Israel to take pressure off the global economy and buy time for a bigger attack down the road. Instead of putting faith in talks, they took the past 2 months to prepare for a bigger fight. The leadership quickly seized the initiative, attacking ships to tighten Iran's grip on Hormuz and expanding the battlefield to the Red Sea, which Saudi Arabia has used to get around Iran's chokehold on the Persian Gulf. Now, the New York Times reports that the appointments of those hardliners to key posts signals that Iran's supreme leader plans to keep the war on a war footing, plans to keep the nation on a war footing, analysts say, ready for an open-ended confrontation with the United States and for keeping a lid on dissent at home among Iranians suffering the economic brunt of the conflict. But there are consequences to a prolonged military involvement, including the human cost to our armed forces. Reporting from multiple outlets has detailed deteriorating conditions, food shortages, and mental health issues aboard the USS Lincoln, including reporting in Stars and Stripes describing sailors struggling with exhaustion and declining morale, including reports of suicidal thoughts and at least one instance where a crew member was prevented from jumping overboard. Well, Admiral Brad Cooper acknowledged mental health concerns on the USS Lincoln after his visit to the aircraft carrier over the weekend, posting, quote, "Here's an important fact. Of the U.S. Navy's 11 active aircraft carriers, the Lincoln currently has among the lowest number of cases related to mental health. This doesn't mean that all is perfect. Find any of the nearly 4 million Navy veterans in America today, and they will likely tell you that service at sea for long periods isn't for everyone." Well, here's what some of their families have told MS Now.
I don't think it's the ship is the issue. I think it's our president, it's our government that's not helping the morale. I think the ship is doing what they can do with what they're given. But I think our government needs to be doing more for our military that's sitting over there.
They didn't choose to be there. They volunteered to be there. They're willing to be there and they're doing their best. So they want our support. And part of that support means we have to have the tools to do our job. That means the fuel. That means the food, right? That means the food. That means the toothpaste and the deodorant. That means all of it.
I didn't want to go to war. I thought, we're tired of these wars. He said, I don't know what's happened. I don't know why he went against this. I don't know why he did what he did. I'm very curious and I hope it was worth it. And that's all I can say is I hope it was worth it because I probably won't vote anymore.
Those are the family members. On Friday, Donald Trump dismissed reports about mental health concerns due to a long deployment, saying he thought the deployment had not been long enough. Yeah, that's what he said. And today, Donald Trump brushed off reports about conditions on the USS Lincoln as, quote, fake news.
Is there enough food on the USS Lincoln?
Yeah, it is. That was a CNN fake report. The Lincoln has been out there for a period of time, good period of time. But over the years, we've had them out there much longer.
Leading off our discussion tonight is Democratic Representative James Walkinshaw of Virginia. He is a member of the House Oversight and Homeland Security Committees. Congressman, where would we like to start? I would like to know what your assessment is of Donald Trump's war of choice now that we are 6 months in, and you just heard that sound from the family members of folks aboard the USS Lincoln. Obviously, they have a different thought about how this is going.
Well, one, Simone, our service members have done everything asked of them. They have performed amazingly. They haven't failed. Their leaders have failed. Secretary Hegseth, President Trump have failed. Donald Trump, as candidate, ran and said he wasn't going to start any more stupid foreign wars. He said he was going to end the stupid foreign wars. Here we are 6 months in to this stupid foreign war, still talking about it. It is a complete and abject failure. And I think when the history books are written about Donald Trump, just like the history books about George W. Bush, the first thing in there will be the catastrophic war in Iraq. The first thing in Donald Trump's history books will be this catastrophic war in Iran.
I think there are many people that would agree with you that it is a complete and abject failure. The question I continue to ask is, well, I've got two questions actually. What was all of this for? And how do we get out of this? Like, what is the off-ramp here?
Well, in terms of what it was for, we should remind ourselves what Donald Trump and his administration said at the time. They said they were going to replace the regime, or help the Iranian people to rise up and replace the regime. That obviously didn't happen. They said they were going to destroy Iran's ballistic missile capacity. We know that hasn't been achieved. They continue to launch missiles throughout the region, and they were going to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. Well, Iran wasn't working toward getting a nuclear weapon before this war started. What has happened is Iran now has learned that they can control the Strait of Hormuz and exercise tremendous pressure and leverage. In fact, this regime in Iran has more leverage today, I think, than the regime has had since the hostage crisis in 1979. And they're exercising that leverage as we speak. Donald Trump wrote a book called Art of the Deal. If he really had any deal-making abilities, now is the time to utilize it. It doesn't seem to be the case. He's unable to make a deal to end his own mistake.
And I don't think it's helpful to the efforts to make a deal when the experts are not the ones at the table doing the negotiating. And, whatever you may think about the business ability of Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, they are not experts on what is happening on anything on foreign policy. Yet on this and so many other issues, the president has put them at the table. So while this blunder is happening, there's a human cost that I talked about. And the president has made these comments about the USS Lincoln not being deployed long enough. Given everything that we have heard about the conditions and the mental health of those on board, you yourself, you represent a number of military families. Yeah. What is your take on not just this rhetoric from the president, but the administration's actions? They're relieving the USS Lincoln now, right? They have sent Bradley, the admiral, out there to see what was going on. So while they're saying one thing, their actions tell us that perhaps they too believe what these families are saying.
Yeah, the callous words from the president and others in the administration are, disrespectful to our service members and their families. Obviously, it's not the first time President Trump has made comments and statements disrespectful to our service members and our veterans. I'm glad to know that the USS Lincoln is going to be relieved, and those folks can get the support and the sustenance that they need. But it highlights how important it is that we bring this war to an end and get the best possible deal that we can get, given the strategic blunders that have led us to this point. Our service members are paying the price, and so are the American people at the gas pump and at the grocery store every single day.
Very quick last question for you. Do you think this war ends by December?
I certainly hope so. If I were a betting man, I would say no, unfortunately. I don't see a clear path to end the war. Neither side, the regime in Iran, is dug in. Donald Trump, I don't think, is willing to concede the folly of getting into the war. So unfortunately, I think it's unlikely that it ends before then.
All right, Rep. James Walkinshaw, thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you.
Coming up, we just established that Donald Trump's war in Iran isn't going well. So now it seems like he wants to take it out on South Korea. We will explain. And later, today was yet another day that Donald Trump lost in court. Stay with us. Donald Trump appears ready to put his friendship with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un ahead of one of America's closest allies. Yesterday, Trump said that he has ordered the Pentagon to scale back joint military exercises with South Korea, and he gave 3 reasons for his order. On social media, Trump wrote, quote, Based on my very good relationship with Kim Jong-un of North Korea, I am not happy with the fact that the United States has long ago agreed to participate in joint military exercises with South Korea. These exercises are not only costly, with much of these costs paid for by the United States of America, as usual, but send a signal that is totally inappropriate and hostile to a country that, as long as Donald J. Trump has been president, has been unthreatening and respectful. Therefore, and based on the fact that it is too late to cancel, I have instructed Secretary of War Pete Hegseth to substantially reduce the joint military exercises. While somewhat unrelated, I recently asked the president of South Korea if they would like to join us in the denuclearization of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And they said, no thanks. Okay. There it is. South Korea refused to join Trump's war with Iran, so Trump is siding with North Korea's brutal dictator Kim Jong-un. Tom Nichols writes in The Atlantic, quote, when Trump makes the effort to say something is unrelated to his actions and then adds a coy question mark, it usually means it is completely related and probably his central motivation. Scaling back the exercise is, of course, an insane decision, which does nothing but hurt an ally and tempt an adversary to think correctly that American leadership is feckless. In Trump's world, every loss, every defeat is a personal insult. When things go wrong, someone must be held responsible, and that someone is never Donald Trump. America and the rest of the world are now witnessing a public exhibition of narcissistic rage. Trump embarked on a war for personal glory, and what he got instead was ongoing humiliation. Hear, Tom Nichols. Well, in the Oval Office today, Donald Trump said this.
How do you respond to folks who say that you are prioritizing the interest of adversaries in North Korea over our longtime partners by scaling back the military exercises?
No, I'm making it much safer. You see, I'm actually making it much safer. Kim Jong-un has always treated me with great respect, and we met on numerous occasions, actually, 2 primary occasions, spoken and spent time. I understand him, he understands me.
It's always about him. Well, the New York Times reports of Trump's order to scale back joint military exercises with South Korea, quote, if implemented, the directive would mark Mr. Trump's first known concrete overture toward North Korea in his second term. However, it remains unclear whether Mr. Kim will embrace the gesture. Today, Donald Trump claimed that Kim Jong-un has responded to his request to have a conversation.
Why hasn't Kim Jong-un responded to your request to have a conversation?
How do you know he hasn't responded?
Has he?
Yeah, yes.
Did you speak to him? Did you speak to him before you made the announcement yesterday?
Where are you in conversation?
And very positive.
Joining us now is Democratic Rep. Mark Pocan of Wisconsin. He is a member of the House Appropriations Committee. Congressman, Mr. Pocan, I don't know why I wanted to make you Pocan today. I'm listening to the president, and I'm a little thrown off. Here's my question. Congress has a congressional study group on Korea, if I'm not mistaken, and it is a bipartisan study group, correct?
Yeah, the former members have 4 countries that we go to regularly because of the importance of their relationship to the United States. One of those countries that I just went to with Democrats and Republicans in early April is South Korea. And, we went to the DMZ zone. We walked a few feet into North Korea. But you got to understand, South Korea is our 6th biggest trading partner on the planet. It's one of our very best allies that we have. And Donald Trump is just proving he's, America's most obnoxious man-child once again in doing this. But to side with Kim Jong-un over, our 6th biggest trading partner is beyond comprehension.
So you're telling me that the congressional study group on Korea that is bipartisan would not agree with the president that his relationship with Kim Jong-un is making us safer?
Privately, Republicans would agree. I'm not sure if they'll say it publicly. But, clearly we went there. Part of what Donald Trump did with his chaotic use of tariffs was he got a commitment from South Korea to invest $350 billion into the United States. And right now, a big chunk of that already is coming in shipbuilding in places like Pennsylvania in my colleague Mary Gay Scanlon's district. And they were about to announce in a few weeks another big development in this investment. That's part of why we went there. And instead, Donald Trump figures out a way to blow up something with an ally, something that's about to benefit the people of our country who are paying too much right now because of those tariffs for groceries and everyday goods. And he found another way to screw this up. It's almost incomprehensible. It's impossible to understand why he would do this at this time, other than he just thinks he has this magical relationship with Kim Jong-un, who right now is providing troops to Russia to fight Ukraine. It just, every layer of this onion is just molding and peeling as we're looking at what Donald Trump has just done.
Now, when you talk to people that aren't foreign policy experts or whatnot, just regular folks out there, like people in your district that I'm sure you've been seeing at the grocery store since you've been home, there are some people that would say, well, what's the problem with North Korea? What is the problem with having a better relationship? And again, this administration often, they say these things that sound benign and they try to make them sound normal, when in reality, what the president is describing about Kim Jong-un and what he is doing in relation to our partner, South Korea, is extraordinarily crazy, as Tom Nichols noted. It's insane.
Yeah, well, Donald Trump loves autocrats. He loves dictators. He just loves the way they're able to lead without this whole democracy constitution thing getting in the middle of everything. But if you think about it, we're in Iran supposedly to stop them from having a nuke, which supposedly we already did a year ago. And of course, we did it under Barack Obama. We had a process to do that. And North Korea actually has nukes, and they could impact allies like Japan and South Korea and others that are all very good trading partners and allies of the United States, and they could potentially send something towards the United States. So we do have to care about it. But at the same time, South Korea is just one of the very best allies we have. The whole war that happened in the 50s, we have such a great relationship since then. And so many of the products that we sell, we're selling to South Korea, which helps having jobs here in the United States. So if we really want to continue to make things in the United States and sell things abroad, which would help, invest in our economy and make everyone better off, you don't do what Donald Trump is doing. It just makes zero sense.
Congressman Mark Pocan, it's the economy. Thank you.
Yeah,
Coming up,
thank you.
It should be an easy question for any attorney general. If the president asks you to do something illegal, will you say no? What did Todd Blanche say? Find out next. The Department of Justice, and especially the Attorney General of the United States, has traditionally been understood to operate independently of the president whom appointed him. The Attorney General is supposed to be the nation's chief law enforcement officer, not the president's lawyer. Let's take Watergate, for example. Richard Nixon appointed Elliot Richardson as Attorney General in 1973. And when the Watergate investigation began to actually investigate the president himself, Richardson did not shut it down. He actually appointed a special prosecutor, Archibald Cox. And when Nixon ordered Richardson to fire Archibald Cox, Richardson refused. Former Attorney General Elliot Richardson resigned rather than carry out Nixon's orders. That is what Department of Justice independence is supposed to look like, folks. The president picks you, but the president doesn't own you, because the president and the attorney general are both supposed to be serving the same entity, the American people, not themselves, okay? So what happens when a president appoints his own personal criminal defense lawyer to run the Justice Department? Well, we are finding out as Todd Blanche is making his answer to that question pretty clear. Here's what he told Kristen Welker on Meet the Press just yesterday.
Can you pledge that the Justice Department will always act independently of the White House?
Well, there's a big difference between saying we will always do our job and investigate any case and act independently of the White House. No, I'm not going to pledge that. And no attorney general should ever pledge that. The president, if I were to pledge I will be independent of the White House, what that means is that if President Trump says, I want the Department of Justice to go after every violent criminal in this country, which is what he has said, what you're saying to me is I just say, no, sir, I'm not going to do it. So I will act with integrity. Our prosecutors will act with integrity. We will prosecute without fear or any sort of favor. And that's exactly what we've been doing. And that's what every Department of Justice should do.
Well, I guess big picture, if the president asks you to do something that you feel crosses an ethical or legal line, would you do it?
The president will never ask me to do something unethical or legal or illegal. He never has. He never will.
So you got to listen, folks. The question is not whether Todd Blanche believes Donald Trump will ask him to do something illegal. The question is whether Todd Blanche is prepared to say no if, and possibly when, he does. And when Todd Blanche was asked whether he would take Donald Trump's opinion into consideration in an individual prosecution, well, his answer probably won't surprise you.
Should the president have a voice in individual prosecution decisions at all?
Every American has a voice in prosecutions. I mean, we hear from Americans all the time. As a matter of fact, many of our investigations start with an American citizen coming forward and saying they saw something. And so whether President Trump should have a, quote, voice, it depends.
Would
But
you
yes.
take his opinions into consideration when he says, I think this case should be revived? Will you take that into consideration?
So hold on. Will I take the President of the United States' view on something into consideration? Yes, of course.
I told you earlier, this administration has a knack for making the extraordinary sound ordinary. And it just happened right there. There you have it. Donald Trump's former personal lawyer says he will consider the president's views on individual prosecutions, and he will not pledge that the Justice Department will act independently of the White House. Blanche is making presidential involvement in individual criminal matters sound routine. It is not. Yes, the Justice Department is, in fact, part of the executive branch. But the executive authority is not the same thing as directing individual prosecutions for personal or political reasons. That distinction is actually one of the main lessons of Watergate. You know, after Watergate, the country put laws, protections, and just as importantly, norms around presidential power and Justice Department independence. And many of those norms were never actually codified into law, which means they survive only if the people in power respect them. This isn't just about one Todd Blanche interview, though. It is clear Donald Trump wants to use the Justice Department as his personal law firm. After relentless scandals, the American public is now overwhelmed, and eventually, what once seemed unbelievably abnormal starts to look ordinary. 53 years after Watergate, we are now watching those norms and the independence of the Justice Department being tested once again. Joining us now is Barbara McQuade, former U.S. attorney and law professor at the University of Michigan Law School. She is also an MS Now legal analyst and the author of The Fix, Saving America from the Corruption of a Mob-Style Government. Barb, I do not want people to gloss over what, in my opinion, Todd Blanche is very skilled in doing. And he really does say the most insane, crazy, like, should be stop you in your tracks things. But because he says it so benign, because he sounds like just another regular lawyer, he doesn't say it with much emotion, I think it can go over people's heads. So what does it mean for Blanche to say that there is no independence of the White House and when it comes to these prosecutions, or frankly, what the Justice Department does every day?
You are spot on, Simone, and listening carefully to what Todd Blanche is saying, because it is an absolute distortion of the norms of DOJ in the post-Watergate era. Todd Blanche, no doubt, was a skillful white-collar defense attorney when he was defending clients, including Donald Trump, by doing exactly what you said, embracing these outrageous claims and treating them as if they're absolutely normal. It's as if he is saying, well, of course my client had the smoking gun in his hand. That just proves how innocent he is. Why would a murderer hold a smoking gun? I mean, that's what he seems to be saying here. And you draw the absolute correct distinction. Presidents since Watergate have certainly been entitled to direct categories of crime. I would like you to prioritize violent crime. I would like you to prioritize even immigration enforcement. That is a president's prerogative. But what we have prohibited the White House from doing since Watergate is to direct the Justice Department to prosecute specific cases. In fact, until now, there's been a ban on even communicating about specific cases. And the memos that memorialize that understanding say not only does the Justice Department need to be free from partisan politics, it needs to be free from even the appearance of partisan politics, because that can so undermine public trust in the rule of law.
Okay, Barb, one more question about this, because you just took me back to when I worked in the White House, and I was a senior advisor to the vice president, a deputy assistant to the president. And before we even got into the White House, we had a very clear briefing about who in the executive office of the president was allowed to even contact people over at the Justice Department. And I'm not even kidding. There were maybe about 6 people on that list. But it strikes me that rule, if you will, was just a norm. It wasn't a law. And so the ban that you just spoke about, it wasn't a law. It's not a law. And so is one of the lessons, not just from post-Watergate, but one of the lessons coming out of this moment, should it be that there needs to be more actual laws on the books and not just norms that we expect everyone to adhere to?
Yes, I think so. I think there's some concern that it could violate the constitutional separation of powers to prohibit the president from talking directly to his attorney general. But I think what we could have is, instead of a congressional statute, we could at least have federal regulations. They would go through the notice and comment period. They'd be codified in the Code of Federal Regulations. And then if some president were to try to violate it, there would be a regulation on the books. And so there would be a violation. It would be more than a norm. It would have some teeth. And I think that is an excellent idea for the next administration to try to enshrine some of these norms into the law.
I think I have an idea about who should lead that task force. She's on this screen and it's not me. Okay, before I let you go, the Supreme Court today, they did some things. They rejected Trump's latest attempt to overturn the $5 million E. Jean Carroll verdict. The court, they ended up leaving the verdict standing. Trump continues to fight a separate $83 million defamation judgment. Do you think this is one of the examples of the limits of power of the presidency and why an independent judiciary matters?
Absolutely. These verdicts come against Donald Trump in his personal capacity, not as the president, but as an individual who courts have found, or juries have found, defamed an individual. And so, I think this court is sometimes seen as in the bag for Donald Trump. I don't see him so much as in the bag for Donald Trump as very much aligned with his worldview about presidential power. And so when it comes to the exercise of presidential power, they very much embrace this unitary executive theory. But when it comes to individual issues, I think that they are holding the line on the law, and he's going to have to pay up.
He's going to have to pay up. Barbara McQuade, thank you so much for your time. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Coming up, Donald Trump calls it the greatest economy in history. But most voters, and yeah, there's a lot of other words they use to describe it, actually. We'll talk about that next with Congressman Brendan Boyle. Stay with us. There's some new polling that has caught up to the reality of Donald Trump's economy. Let me just read it to you. The Financial Times headline about the newspaper's own poll pretty much speaks for itself. Most U.S. voters say they are worse off under Trump. Looking at the numbers, 57% of registered voters say they are worse off financially since Trump took office 19 months ago. If we break it down by political affiliation, that's 78% of Democrats who say they're worse off. And there's no surprise there, right? Okay. But the really bad news for Trump and all those Republicans on the ballot this year is 57% of independents and even 23% of Republicans. Nearly 1 out of every 4 Republicans say Trump's economy is making their financial situation worse. And voters don't think things are getting better. 86% of Democrats, 67% of independents, and 37% of Republicans in that same poll, they all say the economy is going in the wrong direction. And one of the biggest, if not the biggest reason voters feel this way about the economy is, drumroll, gas prices. Today, the national average for a gallon of regular unleaded gas is $4.06. It was under $3 a gallon before Donald Trump started his war in Iran. And there's something altogether unique about the price of gas this particular election year. MS Now's Lily Boudreau reports a recent Politico analysis found that incumbents tend to pay a more significant electoral price during midterm elections when costs at the pump are higher. And for Republicans, that history is taking on new significance for a simple reason. President Donald Trump can be blamed for the spike in gas prices. There's a direct line between the war Trump launched in Iran and the higher costs, and Republicans have done little to rein in the president or even call out the consequences of his decision. But instead, Donald Trump just keeps saying stuff like this.
We have the greatest economy maybe in the history of the world for any country.
Okay. All right. Everybody, that is a textbook example of what we like to call gaslighting, okay? But don't take my word for it. That's what Karl Rove, former advisor to George W. Bush, called it.
You start by not gaslighting. The president made a mistake, in my opinion, last week saying we've got the greatest economy in the history of the world, and prices for groceries and gasoline and everything are coming down rapidly. That's not the experience of the American people.
Joining us now is Congressman Brendan Boyle of Pennsylvania. He is the top Democrat on the House Budget Committee and a member of the House Ways and Means Committee, a good son of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So, Congressman, perhaps you can clear up something for us all, right? Because Karl Rove and I, can't believe I'm putting that in a sentence, are on the same side of saying the president seems to be gaslighting the American people. Some of your Republican colleagues would say we're being hyperbolic and, we're just not trying to give the president his credit. What are the folks in Pennsylvania saying? What do the voters feel like this is the greatest economy maybe in the history of the world? Are they telling you that?
Well, those are the words of a man who I have given him his due. I believe Donald Trump is actually the most successful con man in American history. This is a guy who once was on Larry King Live. He had opened the Taj Mahal Casino in Atlantic City, and it was a disaster. All of the slot machines were breaking down. Without missing a beat, he said, Larry, it's unbelievable. These slot machines, people are playing them so fast. No one's ever seen anything like it. So he's a very practiced liar, and he's typically gotten away with that BS his entire life. But now he's run into a situation in which he can't get away with this one because too many of the American people here in Pennsylvania and all 50 states are seeing prices at the pump. They know that 6 months ago they were paying under $3 a gallon, and now they're paying over $4 a gallon, which, by the way, is the highest gas prices have ever been this late in the calendar in our nation's history. They know they're paying more for the cost of imported goods. They know they're paying more for the cost of food. So this is the one thing Donald Trump can't BS the American people about.
I mean, when I used to obviously work in communications in my former life, and one of the things we always used to say is you cannot spin away someone's lived reality. And the lived reality of voters all over this country is that things are more expensive right now. Whether we're talking about at the grocery store, gas at the pump, plane tickets, right? Like we're in the cusp of back to school. Some children across this country are already back in school, and the backpacks have gone up, let me tell you, okay? The clothes are not as cheap as they used to be. So the lived reality of most Americans in this country is that they are feeling squeezed, but then you've got like this chasm because the more wealthier people in this country, they are in fact doing well.
My wife and I completed the back to school shopping for our daughter just this past week. We can verify that this is the most we have ever paid in back to school costs. I'll be doing something, by the way, here in Philadelphia tomorrow morning, a bill that I have that would bring down those costs. But let's not forget, a big reason why those costs are at a record high is because of Donald Trump's policies, specifically his tariff taxes. That is why you started to see inflation, which had come down every single month in 2024. You all of a sudden saw, beginning last spring, all of that progress erased and inflation start going in the opposite direction, where now, of course, it is climbing with really no end in sight. So this is not an accident. This is not because of the business cycle or a only in a century pandemic. It is specifically because of Donald Trump's policies, both the combination of both his tariff taxes as well as his idiotic and reckless Iran war.
Congressman Brendan Boyle, I think the parents will thank you for whatever you're doing on the back to school stuff to bring their prices down. Thank you for coming tonight. We'll bring you right back in just a second. Remember the days before Donald Trump when this is what amounted to a presidential scandal?
As Commander-in-Chief, I will always do what is necessary to protect the American people and defend against evolving threats to our homeland.
Now, I'm not talking about what Barack Obama said there, but what he was wearing. Remember the tan suit controversy? In the age when right-wing media had to make up scandals for Obama, they pounced on the commander-in-chief wearing a tan suit to a press conference in the White House briefing room. Forget the fact that Ronald Reagan wore a tan suit plenty of times. This fake scandal even has its own Wikipedia page. Well, that was 12 years ago. And today, Chicago political journalism legend Lynn Sweet reports this. The suit is not in the Obama Museum. The legendary suit reporters were told Obama gave away when he was cleaning out a closet. I'm on assignment to find Obama's tan suit. I don't know when Obama gave it away or to whom. This is more than hunting for a needle in a haystack. I don't even know where the haystack is. Well, we wish her good luck. As for how President Obama ended up wearing that tan suit to begin with, well, we may never know the truth. But the former president himself helped make it into a great joke for comedian Larry David's recent HBO show poking fun at American history.
What do you think?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
All right, let's go. I got a press conference to do. You sure about this?
Never been more sure about anything in my life.
Okay. I'll be back.
People are going to be talking about this for a long, long time.
And a reminder before we go, check out my podcast with Eugene Daniels Clockett. On our latest episode, we're joined by strategist and pollster Terrence Woodbury to check in on the voting bloc that could be key to a whole lot of campaigns this year. Black voters. You can also subscribe to MS Now Premium on Apple Podcasts to listen ad-free and get bonus content. Well, that's tonight's last word.